Hi, I'm Karen Sutherland from Edible Eden Design, and I'd like to share with you my dream greenhouse project. So over the years I've had two other greenhouses that have been prefabbed, bought online, put together, or bought from a hardware shop, and they've just been disappointing. They've blown away easily in the wind, the plastic's disintegrated really quickly, or the zips have broken, the panels have come apart, and often it's because of various technical issues. So my personal engineer John has offered to build me this incredible greenhouse to grow my bushweed plants that I sell online, to grow special herbs, and also to grow some food. So first of all, we had to decide on a location. Now my previous greenhouse over yonder, slightly in the shade. So fantastic in summer because the sun was at such a high angle that it didn't get into the greenhouse too much and overheat it. So it was a gentle amount of sun. However, what I found in my first winter here was that not enough sun got through the tree canopy to warm the greenhouse enough during the day. And I had problems with damping off and phytophthora, and I had plants die. So to get our site level, we had to do a little bit of work with the bobcat and a little bit of leveling by hand. So you can see from a distance that the site is on a slight slope. So there not only had to be a little bit of leveling, and we did that carefully under the base of the tree, not to disturb any major roots, and we were lucky that they were pretty deep. And then we also had to do some building up with some of these screenings. So we've used about a 20 mil screening, it's called. So that gives you some perspective in my hand. So they vary a little bit. And these kind of pack together quite well, but they don't have any fines in them. So it's not road base, also called crushed rock. This is screenings, and they not only clump together fairly well because they're quite big, they pack together, they can be walked on really well, and they drain. That's our major issue we want here, is we want drainage. We don't want any pooling or soggy areas around the greenhouse. So you may or may not be able to tell here, but at the minimum point of our screening height, it's about 100 mil, and at the highest level it might be up to around 200, even 250 mil. So that's to help us get our site nice and level for building on. So here you can see we've used some treated pine sleepers, which are not my favourite choice of timber, but very good in this application, with some old star pickets dug into the ground or hammered into the ground to hold them in place. So the sleepers are 200 mil by 50 mil, and we've used them at crucial points where we've needed to. And you notice that we haven't used them around these sides because we've been able to use these as a kind of a ramp to get our little jeeps or to get our carts up and down with nursery plants in them. So now I'm going to hand you over to my partner John, and he's going to lead you through the design and construction. So John, can you tell us why you chose treated pine sleepers for the greenhouse to be built on top of?
Okay, the reason I went with treated pine sleepers was it gives us something that gives us a really nice stable base that will sit down the rock really well. We can drive star pickets or metal stakes in to help secure it to the ground. And then it gives us a nice solid base to attach our metal framework onto.
So the sleepers, can you tell us what sizes they are?
Again, they're 50 millimeters by 200 high treated pine, and effectively we've just screwed them together at the ends with some small brackets in some of the corners.
To stabilise them and square them off?
Yeah.
And can you give us any clues to helping square the sleepers off in any way, like cross measuring or something?
Yeah, really all we did when we assembled the base frame was we measured from this corner here to the far corner down there and took a measurement, and then we ran it back across that way, and that effectively, if they're the same size, it squares our rectangle up when we laid it on the ground.
That's really helpful.
Place the frames on them.
So did you find that you only needed to sit the sleepers on this on these screenings because it's quite a stable base? You didn't need to nestle it in?
We haven't really nestled them in. They're just actually sitting there. Because the base has been laid really quite flat, we didn't need to do a lot more work than that.
That's fantastic. And then explain your choice of metal for the fabrication.
Okay,
Because you've made all this from scratch, haven't you?
What I've used to fabricate the frames with, and this was built in 2 sections, one on each side, and they're just screwed together with a couple of braces at the top and at the back. And at the back also, the sleeper runs all the way across, where it's open at the front where we're going to have the doorway. So these two frames, built with welded together with their benches built into them, are made out of 25 by 25 millimeter angle iron that is 3 millimeters thick, and we've used a MIG welder to weld them together. And then on top of those, we have the mesh that we've basically cut to put our plants on.
So John, why is the metal black then? Is this how it ended up when you finished welding?
The metal comes in a raw finish, and so to stop it corroding, we've given a nice spray paint with some zinc gal or cold gal. It's in a black color, and that's given it the black appearance, and that's just really to stop it rusting.
So John, can you explain what material has been used for the bench tops and why?
Okay, the bench tops are made from some mesh wire. It's actually recycled from some other jobs where we had some tomatoes growing along some of this mesh.
And the quail cage, I think.
Yeah, and we had some quails in the enclosure and some of this tighter mesh down here. And effectively, we've just cut it, notched it out around the different pieces of metal where we needed to, and fitted it in. And from experience with previous greenhouse benches, we have the wire so that the top surface, the wire is running in this direction, and we've found that's easier with sliding things on and off.
I like that one.
If it's running the other way, we find everything catches as you try and slide things on and off the benches. So that's just an orientation of which way you have the wire up. As you can see, we've also got a finer mesh down the bottom here. It's just a different one that we had left over. And you can see here where it was slightly larger. So what we're doing is we're bending it around this edge. This one here is not fully bent over yet. And this one here, we've done a little bit more work to continue to bend it around.
And why do you do that? Can you explain?
It's really just, it provides us a really good edge, and because the wire's bent round, it actually gives more rigidity in the thinner wire than this one up here that has, if you cut it straight off on the edge, it's not as strong as something that has that rolled edge. It just gives us more strength and
stability.
Yeah, allows a bit more stiffness in the wire. This thicker wire doesn't need it as much. It's just a lot stronger, a stronger material, but it's also quite a bit more expensive. And then at the back, we've just got a couple of Tech screws in, and that also shows where the frame is screwed into the sleeper. So how the frame is held down to the sleeper base.
So John, this greenhouse has timber screwed to the outside of it. Can you explain the reason for this?
Okay, the reason for this timber screwed on the outside is primarily we've got a metal frame here, and what we've observed with these greenhouses over the years is they're out in the sun, and these metal frames become really hot, really almost too hot to touch. And what that does is when we clad them with corrugated plastic or greenhouse plastic on the outside of them, that heat really affects the plastic, browns it off and makes it dry out and crack really quickly. So this timber here is to protect the plastic that we're cladding the greenhouse with from the heat of the metal and the extreme heat that we get.
And so what sort of timber have you used?
Okay, I've used some old decking timber here, a bit of hardwood that we had left over from a landscaping job, and also on these longer sections I've got some treated pine decking. It's a fairly cheap building material, and I've actually ripped a plank in half so that I don't need to use as much. It's just saving a little bit of money, and it effectively is doing the job of keeping the plastic away from the metal, and we've just filled in the spots that are going to give us problems.
And now it's time for the really exciting bit, because we get to put the plastic over the greenhouse. So explain what's going on now, John.
Okay, so now we're wrapping the plastic. I've wrapped it around the timber here, and we've wrapped it around the greenhouse a little bit along the top, and now we're going to start to try and put tension on the plastic, hold it nice and tight so it doesn't flap too much in the wind, and use these little timber studs, they're like a staple, to hold the plastic onto the timber.
And also, you were mentioning before how tricky it is to get the plastic square so that you get even height of plastic all the way through, and so there's been a bit of jiggery pokery behind the scenes.
Yeah, so this starting piece is really difficult to really get that square with the plastic, because it wasn't a straight cut edge. If I get this bit wrong, it's going to sort of go downhill or uphill as we go, and tension's not going to be right on our plastic.
So this is what we're using to attach the plastic to the timber. They're kind of called timber studs or staples in the shade cloth section of your hardware shop. So the plastic's been wrapped around the initial piece of timber to hold it, and then we're going to start stapling. Now, so we held the plastic up the top with some G-clamps just to hold it in place to get the height right on the plastic. And there's a lot of adjustment taking place at the moment just to make sure it's really square and we've got an even amount of plastic at the bottom to attach. Lucky John's tall. So what's the height of the greenhouse, John, and the dimensions of it?
The greenhouse is 5 meters long. It's 1.8 of frame and 200 of sleeper, so overall it's 2 meters high.
And the width? What widths are the benches?
The benches inside, each bench is 600 wide.
600 millimeters?
Yeah, 600 millimeters wide. The first bench obviously is at 200, is at sleeper height, and the second bench is at normal bench height, which is 85, so 850
Because
mil.
this is where I'm going to be able to have a nice base as a potting up table and a packing table. And the other aspect is we've put about, was it 1.2 between the benches, I believe, so that there's a good amount of space for turning and easy entrance and exit to the greenhouse.
Yeah, and allow you to get your trolleys and your carts in here and out with plants on them and so on. Okay, so this is the final piece of timber. We've wrapped the plastic around it. Now we're trying to get it as tight as we can by come around the back here.
To stop it flapping in the wind.
Yeah, we're pulling it in, pulling it nice and tight, and then getting the screw guns. And the screw gun, we've already got pre-drilled holes in the steel. So just straight into the timber, and that's reasonably tight, and then lower down again. Okay, here's a piece of offcut of the greenhouse plastic, and having a look at it, if you get your knife, it's fairly easy to cut. Once you do cut it, it's really resistant to tearing. It's really tough plastic, so this is to stop it getting torn apart if it gets holes in it in the wind and so on.
So we're sandwiching the plastic between the two timbers to stop it flapping, and we're just using regular wood screws to hold that down. So we pre-drilled the holes in this timber, and then we just ugga-dugga them in. Whoops, like so. So what's John up to over here? He's doing a bit of fine tuning, so we're just going to check this out.
Yeah, I'm just getting this.
Okay.
The sleeper's protruding a little bit past the front here, so I can't pull the plastic down nicely around the corner. So I'm just going to trim up this edge just a little bit.
What kind of saw is that, John?
This is a carpenter's saw, a timber saw.
But it's not triangular. So does that make it special?
These
rectangular.
These are a little bit more for cutting fairly direct straight lines. A longer saw isn't quite as accurate for cutting straight lines in carpentry work.
Ooh. Not everything is done with power tools. Trim this up. Treated pine, even though, as I said, not very fond of it. It's very soft and easy to work with, so that's one bonus. As it gets closer, we're going to have to move some of that gravel so it doesn't blunt the saw. John gets out a few impressions. Okay.
Beautiful.
Voila.
We're going to trim that up a bit later on. We're keeping working while we've got daylight.
So here we have the finish of this stage before we put the roof on and the doors, and we see that we weren't sure how we were going to vent this. We were sort of just going along and seeing how we went. We think that the two bottom sections underneath the bench, they're a nice little square area. We could cut out the plastic and replace them with a polycarbonate sheet that could be taken off for venting, and we're going to have a door here that you'll see later. But our problems we've noticed so far are, yes, it does get damaged easily, the plastic, but it doesn't tear, so that's a pro. A little bit of condensation with our timber, so it remains to be seen how that's going to go. And we're not too bad with the wrapping, which was quite difficult to get done. You definitely need two people. A little bit of irregularity here, so any irregularity like that can cause flapping, which then could cause damage. So. We've got a bit of bunching down the bottom here, we just couldn't avoid it, and another little bit of bunching top bag here. And there's, even with two people trying really hard, you still get some bunching.